So here it is. Just I'll give you some details on it. Later on we'll get some reviews on products and get a little more in depth. All right, so interior, is mostly stock. I've done some modifications. I do have the Horn Blaster Shocker XL horns. These are going to be my buttons I control it with. We have the on-off button for the compressor and horn button. Now those are only powered by the keys, so if I press it right now, it's not going to do anything. I do know a company makes a switch panel, but I actually made this before they came out with it. I ended up cutting up the factory piece and then gluing a piece of Lexan to the back of it. So I got my rock light switch, the little silver button right there, and then all my light bars right there. And we got my passenger right here, kind of named him Billy Bones. Thought that was a little appropriate. Originally I had a different outfit on him, but kind of thought this one was a little funnier. So threw him together, and he'll stay in there until Halloween and be my little co-pilot. So a lot of you guys have seen my spare tire carrier. I did make this. There are a few companies out there that do make them. Detours of Maine Off-Road is one of them. That's kind of the design I copied off of. Made it a little more fitting to the Jeep. So it fits nice and close to the window. I like the angle of this one. It doesn't go straight up and down. It's a little more angled towards the window. I did kind of fabricate this thing from scratch. Ended up using my extra wheel spacers to keep the wheel out from the window. That gives me the ability to, if I do change wheels and offset, then I can just add or take away spacers. This is what keeps it tight. Most of you guys have seen these on other rear tire carriers. Keeps them tight once it's pushed up. Otherwise it does move, a quarter of an inch or so with the play from the hitch pins. I did end up relocating my license plate down here since it's blocked by the tire once it's up. Ended up having to run new license plate lights. This is all integrated into the hitch carrier, and then use this hitch stabilizer. Those are pretty common, using them to take up the slack once the tire's up there so it doesn't move around. Back here we have the Gear America Shackles. These are their mega shackles. These things are awesome. I have personally used these to pull myself out when I high centered out at Bridgeport, and they work great, and I don't have to worry about them snapping. If you guys are wondering about the mounts and how these are mounted, I know I get a lot of questions about that. This is a factory valance that's been cut down for clearance. Ended up just getting some trim off Amazon to finish it off. But these Clevis mounts are actually welded to the underside. They're welded straight to the hitch tube, so I don't have to worry about those things pulling off. I ended up making cutouts in the valance. Same with the exhaust. I ended up redoing this tailpipe. You can see it up under there. A little more clearance versus the factory resonator, plus I like the little bit extra noise. And then last thing back here, these are normally reflectors. I did end up finding these on Amazon. They replace the factory reflectors and actually make them usable turn signal, brake lights, and tail lights. And I ended up just wiring them straight to the hitch harness. I also get questions about how I run my wiring for my light bars. Well, basically I ended up just running it straight from the roof rack down, and then this goes into the tail light. Just drilled a small little hole, and that runs up under the body and then back up to the firewall where I ran it through into the cap. Easy way. I mean, you do see the wire a little bit back here, but I've had no issues with it. It's the easiest way without having to drill anything in the actual metal. if I ever did remove it, I'd just cap this little hole off and that'd be it. So most of my equipment I keep back here since I don't have the tire back there. You'd be surprised how much stuff you can actually fit back here without the tire and that plastic piece that goes around the tire. We have my Vire compressor. I actually run my horns off this, and I have it set up to where I can hook a hose up to it and fill up my tires. So we keep my air hose. I have a light. Always need gloves back here, especially if you're running a winch. Some cleaning supplies. I did modify a Harbor Freight jack. I'll go into that a little bit later. It does have extensions that I can just screw on. Makes it easy for a lifted vehicle. I've got, I think, a 12-inch extension and then a smallest, I think it's 2-inch, that fits right to the top of the screw. Keep an axe. You know, never know when there's some fallen trees, stuff you got to get out of the way. Always have my Gear America straps. I both have a longer strap and a tree saver for my winch. I've got my snatch block, and then I've also got some synthetic shackles in here. Those I all got off Amazon. I gotta have a first aid kit. You never know when you're gonna need that. Some zip ties, duct tape. Always great stuff to keep in here, and just some spare tools. You never know when you're gonna need it, when you're gonna need to fix something. Always want to be prepared. Cheap tools. I mean, I keep all my better stuff at home, but these come in handy if, you know, got to make a quick repair on the side of the road. Last thing back here is going to be my power inverter. I use this to run all my Halloween lights, my Christmas lights. I ended up making a panel that just kind of screws back here, sits in that little cubby. I know in some of the upgraded models you've got a sub right there, so it wouldn't really be possible, but since mine was the base model to start out with, ended up just making that little plastic piece to fit and screwed it down. Just ran all the wiring down through the body and back up to the battery. But this thing's great. It's got power buttons back here. It tells you what kind of voltage you're running, how many watts your accessory is pulling, and then up front I have a little switch to turn that thing on. But all in all, that's what I keep in the back. Kind of one of the biggest reasons I moved my tire to the back, just so I could have all this space and it wouldn't be in the top taking up room. Here's up front. Motor's just stock 3.6. Don't really have any modifications to it. Most of the stuff that's available is either too much, being supercharger, or, you know, don't really do anything. We've got my fuse box here. I bought this off Amazon. Works great for all my accessories, light bars, horns. I basically tapped into the factory jumper post. I've seen some people say, you know, that's not a great idea, but I've had zero issues with that so far. All my stuff works great. Never had an issue with power draw, anything like that. These are all my relays for my light bars, my rock lights. My horns are kind of hidden. You can kind of see one right here, tucked in there. The other ones are up behind the bumper. I liked it better than having it in the back under the spare tire area. Makes it easy for, basically makes it easier to hide them. You don't have to worry about water getting in them. I know with the horn blasters, they're a little bit made better, so you don't have to worry about water, but I've had horns in the past when they get water in them and they sound like crap. I got my little skull on the front since it is Halloween. He sits there along with the spider in the back, and, you know, billy bones in the cab. Big thing another people ask is my front setup. I did fabricate all of this. When I got my winch, I did end up cutting that lower bar, but I actually like how this looks more than when I first did it. Also, I had to extend it out so it wouldn't hit the fairlead. This is a rough country light bar. It's the same as the ones I have on the top. That's one of their 30-inch single rows. And then I have one of their smaller ones on the back. These are some aux beam cube lights. These are their bicolor lights, meaning you can basically, if you have these wired up, you can run them either white or amber. Right now I just have them running amber just to get a little more contrast from the light bar. And then my lower skid plate, I basically made this out of a big piece of 3/16 steel. I've had to paint it a few times. It did get some rock chips. You can see big one right there. But you know, that's part of off-roading. That's what it's there for. Let's talk about my winch a little bit. I haven't got a chance to actually use this in recovery mode yet. You know, thank God, but I like having it there. I did end up picking up a Poison Spider fairlead pretty cheap from a North Texas Jeep Club group member. And then I've got the Factor 55 shackle on the front. I love that thing over the factory hook that came with this Smitty belt winch. I think it looks a lot better. It's a lot safer. I can use it with the synthetic shackles, not have to worry about it slipping off the hook. I just really love how the thing looks in the front. If you can't tell, I love the red and black together. My favorite color combination. But basically, this skid plate, I know a lot of you guys have been wondering, you know, about it, where I got it. Well, I did make it, so you can't just buy it. But it was a ton of work to fabricate. Love how it came out, something you don't see anywhere else. But basically, I had to weld nuts to the bottom of the radiator sport, and that's where it bolts on. I've got tabs on the bottom. It bolts basically to the bottom of the radiator sport. And then I have mounts welded to my rough country winch plate, and it bolts to the top brush guard. And basically that's all one piece once it's bolted up together. So the brush guard bolts, and you can kind of see my mounts in there. The brush guard bolts to the winch plate, and then the skid plate bolts to the brush guard. I love having that protection in the front. I don't, you know, I know Jeep makes it to where you can take off the valance when you're off-roading, but then you've got a lot of vital stuff exposed, specifically your radiator. Don't want to have to worry about a stick going through my radiator when I'm off-roading just to get some clearance, so I don't have to worry about it. I did end up making these. I know there's a guy that had some of these made to basically replace the factory hooks, but these are shackle mounts that bolt into the factory location. I did make those, like I kind of make everything else. Haven't had a chance to try those yet, but I like having the option if I need to. Plus, I just love how they look. They match my rears. Last thing up front, when I did take the lower valance off, I know I've seen it to where when you take that lower valance off, you just leave the bumper edge exposed. I hate that look, and I wanted to do something different. I haven't seen this done. Ended up basically just cutting the top half of the valance off to where it still pops in place. And then I just finished it off with the same trim that I got off Amazon, just a little lip. You can kind of see it. It fits right around it. It doesn't rely on glue. It actually has metal in it to where it kind of clamps around it. Just gives it a lot more finished look than just having that bumper exposed. We've got the Rolla Vortex rack with the X-Bull slider, or I'm sorry, sliders, recovery boards, and the fuel packs. This is a 5-gallon Rotopax tank. I took this thing to Colorado. There's a few times up in the mountains where we were with my in-laws and, you know, they were running low on gas. I wasn't, but it's nice to have that reassurance when you're out somewhere and you can't exactly get gas to have it. 5 gallons goes a long way. I already talked about the rough country light bars. Love these things, they're great. I've had cheap light bars in the past and those things always leak. But I've had these things on since Christmas and no issues whatsoever. And then the last thing up here, a lot of people ask about my crossbars, how they're mounted so low. You can kind of see it, how much lower that sits than a lot of the crossbars and the factory crossbars they sell. Basically what I did is I bolted these straight down as one unit, and you can kind of see my bolt in there. It's really hard to see, but basically I took the factory bolt out that bolts down the factory rails, got the longer bolt just to compensate for the extra length. I'm not sure on the thread, I have to go back and look. Basically that bolts straight down to the factory rail. Sits a lot lower. I've had my tire up here before I had it on the back, and I had no issues in the thing shifting around or dropping down from the weight because you don't have that extra height from the riser. It's been great so far. I love it. Looks more integrated versus having it stick way up. When I first did this, it was sticking way up and I just hated it. So I was looking at it, I was like, geez, I can just take that riser out and bolt it straight down, and you know, sure enough, that works. Now I'm not going to run a rooftop 10 off this, or you know, 300 pounds of weight, but for 100 pounds for what I'm carrying or whatever, my fuel and my recovery boards, thing works great. All right, the last thing we're going to go over is basically, you know, overall suspension setup, my rock sliders I made, and tires and wheels. So these are 17x9 KMC XD 135 wheels. It's been raining a lot here, so you know, it's a little bit wet out. The only thing I hate about these wheels, and it's like any other wheel with a lip on it, or these B-block design, they trap water down here. Just kind of something you have to get over it with this design of wheel. There's really no way for the water to get out once it's in there, other than once it spins off. That's the only thing I've complained about these wheels. They've been great. The spacing is perfect on them. A lot of guys ask about offset. These are a +18 on a 17x9. You can kind of see where the tire sits in relation to the fender. It's almost perfectly level with the fender. No issues with rubbing. I did flatten the pinch weld back here. Ended up cutting the factory felt liner in here and screwing it back. It gives me a little bit more clearance in the back. But like I said, no issues with rubbing. I didn't have any issues with rubbing up here when I was running the lower valence. I more or less did the lower valence for approach angle. We're running the 285/70/17 LT Nitto Ridge grapplers. I've had these things on since February, and I have nothing but compliments to say about them. They've done great in the mud. I have yet to get stuck in the mud. They do great on the rocks, and they do great on the road. I drive this thing every day. They're super quiet. I run them about 32 to 33 PSI all the time. I drop down to like 17 when I go off-road, and man, they do great. They ride great. You know, I decrease mileage when I put these on. I think I'm running about 15.5 to 16 here in Texas. When I was up in Colorado in the mountains, I was running closer to like 20. But, you know, I don't know if I'm going to go with this same tire in the future. I want to go with a little bit bigger size, probably like a 33 by 12.5 or a 305/65. Might stick with this tire. I might try something new, but if you're looking for tires, these are the way to go. Back to my wheels. Originally, these bolts on the outside were black. If you have these same wheels, these bolts are removable. Now, there are a lot of them, but they are stainless bolts. Originally, they were painted black. I ended up taking every single one of these out and putting them in stripper and taking the paint off. And then just going them over with a wire brush, getting them nice and clean. I like the contrast more, the stainless bolts versus the black bolts. You know, that was the only issue I had when I first got these wheels, is I didn't like the all black look. I like some contrast on there. I ended up painting my center cap emblem, and I just love the contrast now with visible bolts. We are running a Rocky Road 2.5-inch lift. This isn't a full, like, actual suspension lift. A lot of you guys know that have the Grand Cherokees. It is a spacer lift, but I can say it hasn't limited me at all off-road. I'm running the JBA upper control arms. And the main reason I went with these is when I first got this aligned, they couldn't get it into spec. And I knew that was one of the reasons that people go with the upper control arms. And once I got those things on there, it got perfect alignment. It was worth the extra money. I think they were about $450. Got them to my door in a couple days. They were, you know, fairly easy to install. I would say the back bolts on these control arms are a pain to get to, especially the one on the driver's side. It is a bear to get to. Passenger side is not as bad, but I'll tell you this, it's not something I'd want to do every day. Last thing we're going to go over is the rock sliders. Now, these are actually off a JKU. They're the perfect length to fit in the factory plastic. I ended up cutting mine so they kind of tuck up inside, and then I'm not losing any clearance. I actually cut the plastic back here so they actually sit up higher than in the back where the plastic drops down, but they basically, I don't lose any clearance. These things, they sit higher than the lowest point, so I'm not losing any clearance. I know some of those steps that people add on, you lose, because they sit under the plastic, you lose a ton of clearance, and I didn't like that. So I came up with these. Basically, I've still got a step. I step on these all the time. My wife loves having a step now. Plus the added protection. You know, you can see right here, did ding these up a little bit, but that's what they're there for. It's nice to have that added protection over the factory plastic. And basically, if you're wondering how these bolt up, I ended up having to make mounts for these. They bolt into the factory holes under the door, and they sandwich the pinch weld. And these took a ton of measuring and time to figure out how to do it. Lots of welding, but I love the outcome of it. Not really looking to reproduce them right now, but it gives you guys kind of an idea. I did help another member make some brackets for these, and they came out great. I think the sliders he found ended up bolting together, so it made it a little easier. He ended up finishing his project not too long ago. That was the one project for somebody else that I've taken on, and man, I'll tell you this, I remember why I don't normally do projects for people. I just don't have the time. If I do have any extra time, I like to devote it to my own projects. But with baby on the way, about to be here any day now, projects will probably go on hold, but I'll be able to, you know, do some reviews on all my current stuff. I've kind of done mostly everything. You know, there's stuff here and there that I'd like to do, but overall, you know, I know this platform's a little limiting on what you can do, but I think most of the stuff that I have done has been great so far. So, you know, I hope you guys keep up with the channel, keep up with my reviews. I think I've got a lot of knowledge that I can share with you guys. I know a lot of you guys with this platform are kind of new to it. Some guys come over from the Wrangler side and they're not really sure what you can do with these things, but I'll tell you this, there's a lot of possibilities out there, especially if you can fabricate stuff. I know there's stuff on the market, Chief Products, Off-Road Animal, Unique 4x4, all companies that make stuff for these if you're not able to, you know, make the stuff yourself. But if you do have that ability, you know, the sky's the limit. I'm hoping they come out with a bigger suspension lift for these. I'd love to be able to fit 35s on this thing. I know they've done concepts of that and they do in Iceland, but it's a lot of body work, something I'm not really wanting to dwell into. Want to keep this thing pretty nice. I guess maybe in the future if I ever bought another vehicle and I want to just make this thing a toy, might do it, but until then, 33 is about as big as you can go. But I'm hoping the next video I'm gonna do a little review on that power inverter I was talking about. If you like to decorate your stuff like I do, you know, it's a perfect accessory. I think they run about 85 bucks, so won't break the bank, and you can use it for more than lights. But that's about it with the details on the rig, and I hope you guys tune in next time.